Angela Hammond was a young woman living in the small town of Clinton, Missouri. She was 20 years old in the spring of 1991, and she had many plans for her future. Angela, often called Angie by her family and friends, was engaged to a man named Rob Schaefer. The two were looking forward to marriage and were already expecting a child. Clinton was the kind of place where people knew each other, a small community where many felt safe. For Angela, life seemed to be moving in a hopeful direction, with family close by and her future with Rob unfolding. Angela grew up surrounded by people who loved her. She was described as kind, social, and someone who enjoyed being around friends. Her family remembered her as a daughter who was full of life. She had the kind of personality that made people comfortable, and she had a reputation for being trustworthy. It was this normalcy that made her disappearance so shocking to those who knew her. She was not someone who disappeared on a whim, and she had no reason to walk away from her life. She had roots in Clinton, she had responsibilities, and she had plans. On the evening of April 4, 1991, Angela spent time with friends. That night was like many others in her routine. She was with people she cared about and enjoying her time. Later that evening, around 11:15 p.m., Angela drove Rob home in her car. They said goodbye, and she told him she would call him later. This was not unusual for them. The two spoke often and checked in with each other regularly. At that time, cell phones were not common, and payphones were still widely used, especially in smaller towns. Angela intended to make her call from a nearby payphone before heading home. Sometime around 11:45 p.m., Angela stopped at a payphone in a grocery store parking lot. The parking lot was quiet at that hour. She called Rob, as she had promised. The two spoke casually, but during the call, Angela noticed something strange. She mentioned to Rob that a man in a green Ford pickup truck was circling the parking lot. Angela described the truck as having a distinctive decal on the back window, showing a fish jumping out of water. The man eventually parked near her. Angela told Rob about this in real time, speaking from the payphone. At first, the situation did not seem threatening, but Angela became uneasy. Rob could hear the concern in her voice. The man in the truck seemed to be watching her. A moment later, Rob heard Angela scream through the phone. The call abruptly ended. Angela's words stopped, and Rob realized something had gone terribly wrong. Reacting immediately, Rob rushed to help. He borrowed his mother's car and drove quickly toward the payphone where Angela had called from. On the way, he passed a green pickup truck that matched Angela's description. Rob noticed it traveling in the opposite direction. Believing Angela was inside, he turned the car around and gave chase. For a few miles, Rob pursued the truck at high speed. Unfortunately, the car's transmission failed during the chase, and he was forced to stop. The green truck continued on, and Angela was gone. When police were notified, the investigation began with the details Rob provided. They knew the type of vehicle, a green Ford pickup with a fish decal. They also had the timeline of the call and the sudden scream that Rob heard. The parking lot where the abduction happened was examined. Investigators looked for physical evidence around the payphone and the surrounding area. Despite these efforts, little was found that could provide immediate answers. Angela's car was not at the scene because she had been driving it earlier, but she had left it near the phone. Witnesses who had been nearby gave statements, but their observations were limited. The disappearance shook the town of Clinton. It was not the kind of place where young women vanished from public places. Families began to feel a new sense of fear. Parents worried for their daughters, and people were more cautious about being out at night. Angela's family was devastated. The loss was not only sudden but mysterious. They had no answers, no body, and no way of knowing if she was alive or dead. Angela's fiancé, Rob, was also deeply affected. Not only had he been on the phone with her in her final known moments, but he had also seen the suspect's truck and had been close to catching it before his car failed. Some questioned his story early on, but investigators eventually cleared him of suspicion. His presence on the phone call, his immediate response, and his cooperation with police supported his account. Rob's emotional toll was heavy. He had been connected to Angela's last words and felt powerless to save her. As the days and weeks passed, law enforcement pursued leads. The description of the truck was circulated widely. Officers searched for any vehicle in the area that matched it. They looked at registered owners of similar trucks and questioned people who might have information. At the same time, the community assisted with searches. Flyers were printed, and Angela's photo appeared on posters and in local news reports. Tips came in, but most led nowhere. Despite efforts, Angela was not found. Her disappearance remained unsolved, and the truck was never definitively linked to a suspect. This left investigators and the community with more questions than answers. Theories began to form about what had happened that night. Some believed Angela had been taken by a stranger passing through the town, someone who left the area quickly and without a trace. Others suspected her case might be connected to other missing women in Missouri around the same time. There were patterns of abductions in small towns, and Angela's case seemed to fit them. Angela's family continued to push for answers. They did interviews and spoke to the media, hoping to keep her case alive. They wanted people to remember her face, her name, and the details of that night. Over time, the case gained attention beyond Clinton. True crime programs and newspapers revisited her story. Still, no one came forward with definitive evidence. No body was discovered, no suspect was charged, and no one confessed. As the months passed after Angela's disappearance, the Clinton Police Department worked alongside the Missouri State Highway Patrol and other agencies to continue the search. The lack of strong evidence made the investigation difficult. There were no security cameras in the grocery store parking lot at the time, and no physical trace of Angela was found at the scene. Detectives were left with Angela's description of the green Ford pickup truck and Rob's account of the brief pursuit. It was not much to build on, but they kept the investigation open. Investigators considered the possibility that Angela's abduction might have been connected to other disappearances in the region. Around the same time, other young women had gone missing in rural areas of Missouri. The similarities raised questions about a possible serial offender. In some cases, women were taken from small towns or rural roads, and their disappearances had never been solved. Although law enforcement could not prove a direct link, Angela's case was often mentioned alongside them. This pattern added a broader sense of fear for families across the state. During the investigation, law enforcement received tips from residents who thought they had seen a similar truck. A few people reported sightings of green Ford pickups with decals in nearby towns, but when police followed up, most turned out to be unrelated. Many people owned trucks that looked similar, and decals were not unusual in the area. Without a license plate number, it was impossible to narrow down the search. Leads would appear promising, but they would end in disappointment when checked carefully. Over the years, rumors also circulated. Some speculated that Angela might have been taken by someone she knew, though there was no evidence to support this. Others wondered if she had been targeted by a stranger who had planned the abduction. The fact that the man in the truck circled the parking lot before approaching suggested he was watching her. This detail made many investigators believe it was not a random coincidence but rather an intentional act. Angela's family never stopped hoping for answers. They spoke publicly many times, sharing memories of Angela and pleading for information. Her mother often described Angela as a young woman who loved life and was excited about becoming a mother. The family's pain was worsened by the uncertainty. Without knowing what had happened, they could not fully grieve or find closure. Each year that passed without answers added to their struggle. Rob Schaefer, Angela's fiancé, also carried the weight of that night. Some in the community whispered suspicions about him in the early days, as often happens in such cases, but police had cleared him. And his story had never changed. He remained haunted by the memory of hearing Angela scream through the phone and by the failed chase that left him stranded as the truck disappeared. For him, it was not only the loss of his fiancée but also the crushing sense that he had come so close to saving her. In the decade since Angela vanished, her case has continued to appear in media reports and true crime discussions. National programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and later Cold Case Files have featured her story. Each broadcast renewed public attention and sometimes generated new tips, though none have led to a resolution. Angela's case has become one of the most well-known unsolved abductions in Missouri. The absence of a body has left the case particularly painful. Families of missing persons often describe the limbo of not knowing as one of the hardest parts of their experience. For Angela's loved ones, every new piece of information raised hope, but every dead end deepened the sorrow. Her child, who was never born, was another layer of loss. Her family had imagined Angela's life unfolding with Rob, raising a family, and staying connected in Clinton. All of that was stolen in a single night. Investigators have considered various theories about what happened to Angela. One theory suggests that she was targeted by a traveling criminal who may have passed through Clinton and abducted her quickly, leaving the area without a trace. This would explain the lack of leads in the town itself. Another theory is that she may have been a victim of someone familiar with the area, someone who knew where to go to avoid detection. Without physical evidence, both remain possible. Some investigators over the years have suggested links to convicted criminals who operated in Missouri and surrounding states during the early 1990s. Several men were questioned in connection with Angela's disappearance, but no charges were ever brought. In cases like this, where a victim's body is never found, prosecutors rarely have enough evidence to pursue a trial. This lack of resolution means Angela's case remains officially unsolved. The community of Clinton has not forgotten her. Memorials have been held in her honor, and her case is still remembered by residents who lived through those days. For many, Angela's disappearance changed the sense of safety in the town. People became more cautious, more protective of their children, and more aware of the dangers that could appear even in familiar places. Angela's story is now more than 3 decades old, yet it remains active in the minds of investigators and her family. Cold case detectives still revisit the file, hoping that advances in technology might one day reveal something new. DNA evidence has solved many old cases, and although no physical evidence is currently known in Angela's case, authorities have expressed that they remain open to any new development. Her case has also been kept alive by the true crime community, with articles, podcasts, and television features continuing to revisit the details. Each retelling is another attempt to spark memory in someone who might know something. Sometimes, after many years, people who kept secrets finally speak. That possibility keeps the door open for hope. For Angela's family, the disappearance is not just a mystery but a lasting wound. Her mother has spoken of the pain of going decades without answers, of holidays and anniversaries marked by her absence, and of the child Angela never had the chance to raise. Her fiancé's life was also permanently altered by that night. The entire town felt the impact, but for those closest to her, the loss is personal and never-ending. The case remains one of Missouri's most haunting unsolved crimes. Angela Hammond's disappearance is a reminder of how quickly life can change and how a single event can alter the course of many lives. For the people of Clinton, the quiet town where she lived, it is a story that has lingered for generations. For her family, it is an unanswered question that still waits for resolution. More than 30 years later, Angela's fate is still unknown. Her abductor has never been identified, her body has never been found, and the green Ford pickup has never been traced to a responsible party. Yet her name continues to be spoken, her face continues to be shared, and her story continues to be told. The hope that someone, somewhere, might still come forward remains alive. Until that day comes, Angela Hammond is remembered as a daughter, a fiancée, and a young woman whose life was stolen too soon, leaving behind a mystery that endures.